Welcome to the Guelph Real Estate Report podcast with your host and Guelph Realtor, Ryan Waller. This podcast is designed to provide information for those buying and selling homes in the Guelph area to make the process more informative, fun, and a little less stressful. Now, on with the show.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Guelph Real Estate Report podcast. This is episode number 39. My name is Ryan Waller, and I work in Guelph Real Estate with my lovely wife, Beth. I have to apologize off the top for taking a month in between episodes. It has been a really busy time, both for work and just personally with the kids. And we just needed the extra time, so I skipped a mid-month episode. So today we're going to talk about what happened in June in Guelph Real Estate, as well as now that we've wrapped up a first half of the year, what that looks like as well, and then touch briefly on what we can expect over the next few months. July 1st is a defining moment in Guelph Real Estate, where we see a split between the first half, that goes from January 1st to June 30th, from the second half, which is July 1st to December 31st. Statistically, 60% of sales over the past 5 years are done in the first half of the year, where the remaining 40% are done in the second half. And it makes sense. After you come through a long, cold winter, there's some excitement about getting out and looking for a new home, or if you're selling, waiting until the grass turns green and the flowers bloom, the weather gets warmer before you put your house on the market, because oftentimes it looks best during those months. And that's why the months of April, May, and June are the busiest months in Guelph Real Estate. But once we pass that and we move into July, things start to naturally slow down. July and August can be as slow as November because people go on vacation. They don't want to think about buying or selling a house. They want to spend time with family at the beach or doing anything other than thinking about the real estate market. Once we get into September, there is a bit of a blip up as we get back into routine, especially those with kids. And we do see some activity as people try to make their move and get into their new home or sell their existing home before Christmas. And it doesn't necessarily mean that prices crater as we get into the later months, but it does mean that there is less activity, less people looking, buying and selling as a whole after July 1st. And so with the majority of transactions happening in the first half of the year, it usually sets the tone for how the full year is going to turn around, barring some crazy economic news that changes the market dramatically in one way or another. We can expect that it's probably going to be similar now all the way through to the end of the year. Okay, so let's get into the June numbers. You can find the whole written version of this along with some extra charts on our website at bethandryan.ca. And how did we do in terms of the number of sales versus last year? And for the sixth straight month, we are down versus last year. And we are down 13% in the number of homes sold this year versus last year. And I do remember a year ago, this time last year, talking about how the numbers then in 2025 were at multi-year lows, the number of transactions that completed. And here we are finishing June at minus 13% on last June. If we take a look at the full half year, we're minus 13% in the first half of this year versus the first half of last year. I'm not sure how much lower it can go. I seem to be surprised every single month when the sales volumes come in below last year, but does this mean next year is going to be even slower? It's almost at the point where it's hard to believe. Nonetheless, we came in sluggish in the month of June. Buyers and sellers are still struggling to come together on transactions. And from my perspective, it's getting more difficult as listings increase and buyer activity is going to start to slow down. It's going to be a little more challenging to make those transactions come together. On the month, we had 148 sales, which breaks down to about 4.9 sales per day. Prior to this year, every other June was at 5.8 or higher. So it's the first time we've come down into the fours in many years. So another sluggish month to add to the list here. 4.9 sales per day equals 148 sales on the month, as I mentioned, of which 111 were in the detached segment at an average of $878,000, and 37 were in the condo segment at an average of $581,000. You blend those two together and you get Guelph's average price for the month of June, which was $803,000. If we look specifically at the detached segment, of the 111 units that sold, the low price was $545,000. That was a semi in downtown Guelph. And the high price was $2.7 million. That was a big house in St. George's Park. As mentioned, the average price was $878,000. What does that mean? Well, over the past year, we've been floating between $800,000 and $900,000. So $878,000 is closer to the high. But if you take out that $2.7 million sale, the average drops to about $861,000. So holding its own in the detached segment, and prices definitely aren't slumping. We had a fair number of houses that sold in the month over $1 million. And homes here sold an average of 97.2% of the last listed asking price. 20 of the 111 sold over the asking. That's 18%. 3 sold at the asking, and the remaining 88, or 79%, sold under the asking price. So there has been a big rise in inventory in the detached segment over the past month or two. It caught up to the number of condos that were on the market and then passed it. So we now have more homes in the detached segment. I think we're at 320 at this point. And that number was down closer to 200 earlier in the year. So big rise in the detached segment. Is it a good time to buy or sell a detached home? The demand here will always be there. For every one condo that sells, 3 detached houses sell in Guelph. And so as prices tend to come down, we are seeing some better and better deals. Buyers are demonstrating their patience, sitting on the sidelines, shopping around, taking time to compare, and in no rush, and feeling like they are, for the first time in a while, in control. We're noticing that properties that are a little bit more unique or in more desirable areas are selling well and selling quickly. However, we're noticing homes that are in neighborhoods that have a lot of similar type homes on similar streets, that they are being pitted against each other by buyers, comparing them, negotiating them, being a little more critical on finishes, layouts, etc. And of course, the big key is pricing. Gone are the days of, air quotes, testing the market. I can tell you what happens when you test the market in this market is that nobody books an appointment. You have to be competitive with your other houses that are available on your street, in your neighborhood, similar style, because if you're not, buyers just won't make an appointment. And if you have a house that's been on the market for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, and have had less than 5 showings, the market is telling you that at that price, they have better options and you're being ignored. If we flip to the condo segment, there are 37 units that have sold here. $282,300 was the low price. That was in Dovercliff, and it has been a minute since we've started talking about houses under $300,000. So this is great to see. $282,000 is the low. $1.298 million was the high price. That was in Victoria North, in the northeast corner of Guelph. And we did see a blip up in May, where we saw more activity, higher average pricing than we've seen in a while. And the question at the end of May was, would this continue? And the answer was, well, the average price continued. In fact, it actually finished higher in June than it was in May at $581,000. But the number of sales, the actual sales velocity, decreased back to what it used to be, which is between 1 and 1.3 per day. We finished at 1.2 per day. So part of it, we're still kind of watching this segment to see if there's a bit of a change in trend. I think the biggest mention of the condo and townhouse segment is that we really have no new inventory. In fact, we finished June at the same inventory level we had at the end of May, which is just under 300 units available. So an interesting note that this, for the longest time, this condo segment had an increase in inventory, increase, and now it really has stabilized. So it's something we'll be watching, but perhaps this is the bottom in this segment. 19% of condos in Guelph in June sold over the asking price. 8% sold at the asking price, and the remaining 73% sold under the asking price. Is it a good time to buy a condo in Guelph? We think so, although there is a chance it could get better. We'll keep an eye on this segment and let you know if we see any material change. But if there is something specific that you're interested in, let us know, because there are different pockets of condos in Guelph, and some are performing slightly better than others. Based on the current sales and current inventory, we are sitting at 4.1 months of inventory, which almost puts us exactly in the middle of a balanced market, although it definitely doesn't feel that way. Technically, it is. I think we're going to move much closer to a buyer's market once the sales start to slow down in July and August, and inventory levels, I think, will remain around the same. If we take a look at where the June numbers put us at full year, so if we now take June, add it in, and give year-to-date performance of January 1st to June 30th, the number of homes sold is minus 13% in Guelph. That's 115 less houses that have sold this year versus the same period last year. Dollar volume, so if you add up all the sales, we are at minus 17%. And the average price of a house in Guelph is down 4% versus the same period last year. So that's $768,000 this year on average versus $802,000 last year. And that, my friends, brings us to the end of the episode. If you have any questions on the Guelph real estate market, you can certainly find us on our website, bethandryan.ca. Obviously, you're listening to the podcast, and you can find us on video format on YouTube. Thanks again.